Hey there, Legal Tea listeners. This is your host, Jenny Roselle. And today I have a co-host with me. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Well, thanks for having me, Jenny. This is her better half, Justin Shoemaker. So she asked me if I would participate in this one, and I look forward to my debut as a
And your interruptions?
Co-podcaster, I guess, yeah.
Today's episode of Legal Tea is a cautionary tale, which is a real-life case with real-life people and real-life facts, though their names are altered for confidentiality purposes. Today's specific topic centers around the wonderful saying from Mr. Benjamin Franklin, which is one of my faves. Failing to plan is planning to fail. You want to repeat that one?
Sure. Failing to plan is planning to fail.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
And it's very pertinent in our world.
Oh my gosh, especially today's episode.
Yes. So let's talk about how that saying plays out in our little estate and elder law world. And to do that, we're actually going to talk about the Smith family, which of course is actually not their real name, but the Smith family were actually a family that Justin helped. So a little bit about the Smiths. We've got Joe and Jan, and they were husband and wife. And Joe and Jan had one child named Tim. Joe and Jan were in their 80s, while Tim was in his 50s. You see, Jan had pretty advanced dementia, and Joe and Tim had come into our office to talk to Justin about their options as they discussed placing Jan in nursing home care. And in case you didn't know, long-term care is crazy expensive. It's actually what elder law actually is. We have a lot of people ask what elder law even is. And clients will say in the conference room often to me, Jenny, what is elder law? Is it helping old folks like me? Well, that kind of is what it is. More respectfully put, much of elder law consists of helping families navigate their options on paying for home health care and long-term care. So think like assisted living, nursing home, that sort of thing. Around here in Indiana, which we have a pretty reasonably low cost of living in this state, would you say so?
Oh, yeah. Compared to some friends and colleagues in other states, what I hear some of their costs are, especially for the long-term care. It's different, but it's still expensive nonetheless.
Yeah. So home health care costs depends on really how much you pay a professional caregiver. They often charge hourly. So by a quick search, we're talking about $20 to $30 an hour usually. So that's usually, when we're talking about 40 hours a week, that's about $3,000 to $5,000 a month if you're needing some sort of professional caregiver. Now, assisted living is usually in that same ballpark, somewhere in the $3,000 to $5,000 a month range. But skilled nursing, that's where they really get you. This is what a lot of people call nursing home care, and that's usually in the $7,000 to $10,000 a month range. More on the higher end. We really don't see $7,000 all too much anymore. So keep in mind these are Indiana ranges and just the average cost that we sort of professionally see. I'm certain in places like California and New York, they're probably more expensive.
Well, I think one thing, not to interrupt, but
to interrupt.
Yeah, but to interrupt. One thing to also consider, especially when you get to that skilled nursing need, there's just so many services that go into that because the care level is just so high.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people lose sight of that. So, there's just an awful lot that goes into those things, which drives those prices to be
up.
What they are.
Yeah. So this is the elder law side of our practice. And families come in, they're concerned about how to afford long-term care. And it's pretty rare that we see individuals with long-term care insurance. And while it certainly helps down the road when we do need care, many people don't move forward with it because of its costs. It's pretty expensive. Or they don't move forward with it because the reputation. In the past, long-term care insurance was thought of as, you could pay all this money and never use it. Now, there are new, better products nowadays. Or they don't get long-term care insurance because they can't medically qualify. So, perhaps you have some condition that makes you ineligible for it.
One thing I know in a lot of conversations I've had with people is by the time they even contemplate long-term care insurance, they've got
It's
to that
too late.
point. Yeah, they're
late.
to the point where they're uninsurable, or the premiums are just don't justify the potential benefit they may receive, at least in their mind.
Yeah. So for these reasons, these conversations, long-term care insurance is honestly usually off the table. And we're more weighing the option of either private paying for the loved one, and that may mean the person runs out of money, or we're talking about structuring assets in a way to qualify for governmental benefits like Medicaid. And this is exactly what Joe and Tim were talking about in our office with Justin regarding Jan. Jan, of course, did not have long-term care insurance, and they wanted to know what their options were in regards to qualifying for Medicaid. The good news is that there's a way to structure their assets in a way to get her pretty quickly qualified for Medicaid. What that consisted of, however, was moving a majority of the assets over to Joe's name alone. We were able to accomplish this because there are very different rules in Medicaid law for married couples opposed to single individuals. So fast forward some time, and Jan goes into the nursing home, because honestly, Joe just couldn't truly care for her, or at least give her the best care at home anymore. And we Justin and our team worked our little elder law magic and got Jan qualified for Medicaid. So they didn't have to private pay those arm and a leg prices anymore.
I remember when the family first came and sat and talked with me. This is a very blue-collar family. It worked very hard for a number of years, saved their money, invested, thought they were doing everything the right way, what you're supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
And they informed me that they were privately paying, and in the calendar year prior to sitting down with me, they had paid out $92,000 in one calendar year just for her care, because again, they just could not provide the care she needed at home. So certainly the services were needed. And at the same time, they saw their life's work, financially speaking, being dwindled away at a very rapid pace. Mm-hmm. So they were bleeding financially, and they wanted some help.
So anytime after we get someone of a married couple qualified for Medicaid, it is very standard practice that we always encourage the healthy ones, so here it was Joe, to create or update their estate plan. Now for Joe, he didn't have a will or anything, so he just needed to get something created. Specifically, this is because mostly all of their assets are hanging out in Joe's name now, and if he were to unexpectedly pass away, we don't want assets freely going over to Jan's name, because then she would get kicked off of Medicaid, and all that work would be for nothing. So that's what we did. We immediately started to encourage Joe to get his estate plan created. And we tried. And I don't even know how many times we tried. Yeah.
I don't know what else to say about that, but it's one of those things. I think it becomes so much going on just to get the benefits qualification aspect figured out that they think, okay, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to think about any of this stuff anymore.
Those lawyers are just overcomplicated.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there is a reason why we try to encourage people to get their own documents updated in this stage.
Yeah. So our world is filled with these you can lead someone to the water, but you can't make them drink it moments. And Joe just never got back to us about his will. And tragically and completely unexpectedly, Joe actually passed away. And like I've been blabbing about, he had no will when he passed away.
So, this is a classic example, and this is a little bit of a side note, not really tying to the planning aspect, but how many times we see it over and over where the caregiving, healthier spouse has worn themselves so ragged that it's not uncommon that the caregiving spouse might predecease the other spouse. And this is exactly what happened here. And not to scare anybody, but this is one of those reasons why you always have to be thinking about the plan and updating the plan and making sure we've covered our bases.
Just thinking through things holistically and from like a 50,000 foot overview of what could happen, truly. Okay, so what we've learned from past episodes, if you've tuned in, that passing away without a will means that we're going by the intestacy laws. And those laws, oddly, say that half of the assets go to the spouse, so Jan, and half go to children, so Tim. And I'm sure you're thinking, oh, thank goodness, not everything went to Jan. Well, you're probably thinking that because you think that's where this story ends. But it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. So let's continue. And I promise this is a real story, guys. So, like I said, Jan is entitled to half of their assets. And she's going to ultimately get kicked off of Medicaid, which is completely reversed what we worked so hard on. At this point, because we are dealing with Medicaid law for single individuals, Jan will not be able to immediately go back on Medicaid, and she'll have to private pay for probably ever.
Well, a while. We'll put it that way.
A good long time. And Tim is entitled to the other half of his dad's assets according to those intestacy laws. The crazy twist in this story is that we actually only learned about Joe's passing, the dad, because the nursing home that Jan was at called our office to tell us that they had heard Joe passed away and that Tim, the son, passed away too.
Yeah, this was so unusual.
Yeah.
Originally, all three of them actually lived together. They all lived in the same home, so they were a very close family, as you could imagine from that. And so after Joe had passed, the nursing home had communicated with their son, Tim, and he was their point of contact to give updates on Jan and so forth. Well, we didn't learn about any of this until they reached out to us because we helped them with the benefits application and said, by the way, both of them are gone.
Mm-hmm.
Her husband and her son are now deceased. What's going on? What do we do? And so we were all trying to navigate this and try to figure out what the next actions were. But, unfortunately, this is a reminder, even from Tim's perspective in this situation, we always encourage people to, they'll ask, when do I update my estate plan? Well, anytime there are significant life changes. So this is one of those things where Joe and Tim had actually passed away about 5 months from each other.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been one of those things. Obviously, you want to grieve, do those things. But when that significant change took place, this would have been a call to action for Tim,
mm-hmm.
I would think, to really get his plan put in order to think, oh my goodness, what's next? I better cover these bases.
Yeah, well, that's not the theme of this episode.
I know, that's for another time.
The episode is failing to plan. And just as the theme of this episode continues, well, Tim didn't have a will at all. He had nothing. So the intestacy laws state that his estate goes to his parents. And that is his estate, his assets are now going to Jan. So in super long story short fashion, everything is coming back Jan's way. All of Joe's and Jan's assets, and now Tim's assets too. I mean, everything.
A fairly well-off lady on Medicaid, at least until she's kicked off.
Yeah. So what makes my heart absolutely hurt is that they paid us to get Jan on Medicaid, and we did. Then we had to take Joe's estate through probate, and there's legal fees. Then had to take Tim's estate through probate, and there's more legal fees. And it somehow doesn't stop there. Jan, remember, she has advanced dementia. So at this point, because her husband and her son have both passed away, she had to have a professional guardian appointed for her because everyone in her power of attorney had passed away. And she was not of sound mind to update and execute a new power of attorney to name new people. So, yeah, again, read professional guardian, there's more fees.
Yeah, again, just another reminder, sometimes we will encourage people, build in as many backups as we can think about. And oftentimes, this contingency I don't need, that contingency I don't need. Well, you don't need it until you need it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a prime example of that. Build in the backups that you may think, I'll never need this personal service.
Let's hope we don't get that far.
But if so, I'm ready.
Yeah. So if I can be so simplistic, there was a path that 1, would have gotten Jan on Medicaid, 2, kept Joe's estate out of probate, and 3, kept Tim's estate out of probate. But for reasons we may never know, that's not the path the Smith family took, and they paid for it. Literally, they paid for it. So anything else to add on the Smith family before we talk about next week's topic?
I have worked with a financial advisor that knows the family quite well, and we both said we are going to get together and write a book about this one case.
Yeah.
Because it's heartbreaking, it's tragic, it's one of these things that so many things could have been prevented, but they weren't. They failed to plan.
Yeah. Old Benjamin Franklin.
That's right.
He was onto something. Okay, so next week's topic is a current event, current trend, and it's something I've seen or run across that I think would be interesting on here. And it's that next week is not actually something I ran across. We're going to be talking about something a team member of mine stumbled across on TikTok. Do you know what TikTok is, Justin?
I've heard something about it. Is that what a clock does?
So that's the app where people dance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, where you learn like life hacks.
What's an app?
Yeah.
No.
So next week we're going to be talking about a young couple named Josh and Megan. And they, along with Josh's mother, actually appeared on Dr. Phil. So for my older listeners, Josh and Megan's story is, unfortunately, a modern-day Terry Schiavo case. You know that name.
I do.
I know you know that name. So, and for my younger listeners, look up the name Terry Schiavo. And if just in case you've never heard of it, now you've heard of the name. So until next time, Legal Tea listeners, talk soon.